Okay, if everybody can find their seats, we're gonna get started in a couple minutes. Yeah, sure. I'll go to this side. All right, the time is 7:07, and I'm calling the meeting to order. Please stand for the land recognition. And it is an important step in the ongoing process of reconciliation. Reconciliation aims to establish a mutually respectful relationship between non-Indigenous and Indigenous peoples. Before coming to Western, I'd never heard of a land acknowledgement and had very limited knowledge about the Indigenous population. Through coursework and events such as We Are All Treaty People, I had the opportunity to establish a relationship with Indigenous people, their culture, and gain a better perspective about the history and resilience of the Indigenous population. Our university campus that we have the privilege of enjoying to learn and grow upon is the home of many thriving Indigenous communities, such as the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and the Attawandaron peoples, who have long-standing relationships to the land and region of southwestern Ontario. The local First Nation communities of this area include Chippewa of the Thames First Nations, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. In the region, there are 11 First Nation communities and a growing Indigenous urban population. Through this land acknowledgement, I hope to pay respect to the original peoples of this territory and encourage each of you to use your privilege to support and further the process of reconciliation. Thank you. And please remain standing for O Canada. All right, we'll now move on to the Western song. W's up. Western, Western, Western U, college fair and square. Arts and men's are strong for you, deny it if you dare. This one college is the best, come and let us show. This you is our you, and for her we'll strive to do our best to fight with might and main. What's Maine? We will always adore her, our alma mater, Western School of Fame. Western U goes marching down the field. We know our team will never ever yield. Though the other team has lots of pep. See our team, they'll know they're out of step. And when the game goes down in history is another Western victory. Cheers go out for Western U, Western U. Rah, rah, rah. Community, free, hubble, hubble, ricky, racky, root. I am Western U, WXTERN, Western, woo! That's you next.
Think you got out of it? Yeah, very right. President does right.
All right, so I don't have any comments at the moment, so we can move on to approving the agenda for tonight. Can I get a mover in favor of the agenda? Councillor Adewusi and a seconder, Councillor Paharger. All right. Are there any objections or amendments? Sorry, are there any amendments to the agenda? All right. Are there any objections to the agenda? All right. So seeing no objections, we will move on with the agenda as approved. We don't have any minutes for tonight. President Gelaire, do you want to come up and introduce Declan? Oh, good. Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
So the presentation is about to go up, but while that happens, so as you all hopefully know, this is our special meeting at council to discuss next year's budget and the fee schedule. So I just want to preface this by commending Declan for the amount of work that's gone into this. I had the privilege of sitting in on a bit of the process and overseeing a bit of it, but this is Declan's baby, and I think it deserves this recognition because the amount of work and the sort of the narrative that's been built around this and the reasons for the decisions that have been made are really incredible, and I hope you guys will look at it and see the vision that we've put forward, and we hope you guys really take a critical look at it and enjoy the immense blood, sweat, and tears that Declan and our whole team has put into this. So without further ado, our Secretary-Treasurer, Declan Hodgins.
Don't know how I'm ever going to get these to fully work with my height, but this is the best try I can do. Good evening, Council, and thank you for giving me the immense privilege to present our budget for USC fiscal 2021. I'm here today to show you our plan to invest in student voices. At the heart of the USC is the idea of the student voice. We were founded on the principle that students should band together to speak up for their interests. Since 1965, we've grown in size and scope, but the core of what we do has remained the same. We are here to be the voice of students and to drive change to benefit the undergraduate students at Western University. This core has become our vision statement, that students have the power to change the world. And that is what we are here to announce investments in today. Before I get into it, I want to go over a couple housekeeping items. The specific things that are approved by council are the executive budget and fee schedule, with the corporate budgets lying under the board jurisdiction. But what I'm presenting for you right now is not a line-by-line overview of the budget. That has already been done at standing committee, and that took like 2 hours. What I'm bringing forward today is a strategic document, setting a course forward for the USC. I've distributed a number of copies of the direct budget documents that you're approving around the room for your reference. Cecilia is also going to pass out, I think, 3 copies of our bound budget book that you can pass around and take a look at if you so wish. When my predecessor Andrea wrote her budget last year, it was a dark time for the USC. The Student Choice Initiative had just been announced, and our future was uncertain. I'm happy to say that everyone in this organization, from staff to student leaders, did their part to demonstrate our value to students and our relevancy and ensure that we emerge from SCI stronger than ever. Now we're able to look forward and make strategic investments for a better tomorrow. This is our plan to invest in student voices. After 3 months of extensive consultations and a noticeable recession in my hairline, we have identified 6 key areas that we focused our budget planning on for the upcoming year. These pillars are modernizing student government, elevating our student life, connecting with students, amplifying their voices, promoting a culture of wellness, and preparing for the future. And these chart a course forward for our organization, where we can be ever more effective, efficient, and relevant with our students now and into the future. So I'm going to go over basically the major areas in which we're making changes. If anyone has questions about specific areas of the budget, I'm happy to answer those later, but I'm trusting that you've all taken the time to review these documents ahead of time. So starting with our first pillar, modernizing student government. The first thing that we, can we go back a couple slides, back another slide? Back up, right there. The USC is built on the foundation established by our council, which is our core institution. Councilors, as you know, oversee the executive, vote on motions, really hold us accountable, and represent the constituents. However, unfortunately, historically, our organization has not done enough to prioritize the development of our counselors as student leaders. We've made student development a priority, but that does not necessarily trickle down to council. So that is why we've made student development for our council one of our top priorities in this year's budget. We've hired a manager of government and election services, who we all know, Melissa, who's been working to support the activities of our council and elections and works with counselors to help build them into the student leaders they want to be and to help you guys thrive on council floor. We're also announcing an investment of $30,000 into council development, helping train the next generation of counselors so that next year's council can be ever more effective at holding the executive accountable and making decisions to move our organization forward. The USC is built on the backs of our student leaders and staff, and as such, developing these leaders is a huge priority for our organization. By providing professional development opportunities, people not only become more effective at serving our campus community, they also emerge from the USC stronger than ever before. I think the strength of our alumni network really goes to show the value of that, both benefiting our students who interact with the USC and broader society as a whole. Our associate coordinator and intern programs have seen incredible success over the past decade. And the hundreds of students who work part-time in our organization get important skills for whatever industry they decide to go into. We will continue to commit considerable resources and staff to providing meaningful employment and development to all of our student leaders. Additionally, we are going to be growing our intern program going into next year, adding an additional 2 summer interns as well as new associate roles. At the USC, our backbone really is our information systems. From managing our resources to connecting with our students, information systems are the linchpin of our success as an organization. While our information systems department does a fantastic job, right now they're stretched quite thin, and they don't necessarily have the capacity to take on huge new projects. And during trips to other student associations, we've really seen some of the potential. At student associations like Waterloo, the amount of value they can get out of really putting money into their information systems, the connection they can develop with their members, the data-driven decision-making that becomes possible. That's why we are going to be adding staff to our IT department, continuing to be forward-looking in our needs, and so they can do change management and help bring the USC into the future. At the core of the USC's mission is our ability to represent our students and speak on their behalf. Municipal, provincial, and federal politicians, as well as Western administration, all rely on our organization to tell them what undergraduates at Western believe. While we go to great lengths to connect with students and hear their concerns and be accessible, we still lack the ability to conduct opinion research of our student body at a scale that gives us statistical significance and the corresponding confidence that our data accurately represents our students' beliefs. If we were able to establish a capability to regularly conduct high-quality qualitative and quantitative analysis of our constituents through surveys, our ability to speak on behalf of our students would increase exponentially. Advocacy backed by data significantly increases our ability to influence political and administrative decisions in a way that favors our students. For these reasons, we've made establishing a built-out student feedback capability that can conduct high-quality research to be one of our greatest priorities. That's why we're investing $120,000 into the initial establishment of a student feedback capability to be overseen by our Information Systems Department. This will fund the wages and operating costs of our student feedback staff and will enable us to begin seriously developing this as a capability. Because right now, student engagement and collaboration is one of our main pillars as an organization. And yet, the amount that we spend on student feedback right now is 0.03% of our budget. We need to do better, and this budget's going to make us do that. The next pillar is elevating our student life. I'm going to start with clubs. Clubs are the USC's single largest student program. Over 18,000 club members, over 200 ratified clubs. They provide entertainment, support, development, and advocacy for their members. While our club system is thriving, we believe we can always do stronger. We can always be stronger. Currently, for every club membership that is sold, the USC collects a $2.50 administrative fee. But additionally to that, we also charge a club's administration fee as part of our fee bill. The money that goes in that deduction we take of every club membership is money that could be going to clubs to help them fund even more and better programs for their members. Students are already paying a club's admin fee, so it doesn't make sense to charge a second time. So we've made the decision to remove the per member deduction from clubs and allow clubs to keep 100% of the money that their members pay in fees. In this year alone, that will provide $45,000 of new money for our clubs. We also know it's hard sometimes for clubs to start up when they're newly ratified. How do you do Clubs Week when you have no money in your bank? So we've also decided to issue, and we actually started this year, issuing a $100 startup grant to every newly ratified USC club, giving them the resources they need to succeed in their critical first year of operations. I'll now talk about student life. This past year, we've seen how programming put on by the USC can elevate student life and help build relevancy with our students. Fantastic concerts like Bryce Vine, the Arkells, Purple Fest all help put Western and the USC on the map as a leader in student life. Things like Beer Fest and the Bachelor watching parties draw large numbers of students, and atrium features like We've Got Game, the video game thing, or inflatables, they can help students relax in between classes. There is another thing. The student events we put on help us show clearly and definitively that Western is, and always will be, better than Queens. Our students haven't just expressed to us that they want to see more and better programming. In fact, for many, the programming we do is the main way the USC is relevant. This year, we've decided we're prepared to take our programming a step further. First of all, we're going to split the AVP programming into two roles, one overseeing the coordinators that run things like Theater Western or Early Outreach, and the other one focusing just on delivering high-quality student events in conjunction with the Vice President Student Support and Programming. Additionally, we're raising the general programming budget from $85,000 to $100,000 to help us bring our events to the next level. I'm going to talk about student artists now. At a school with such a prestigious music faculty, it is natural that Western is home to a large number of incredibly talented student artists. Unfortunately, in the past, we've often neglected them, not giving them platforms to perform. In recent years, progress has been made, but there's a lot of work to do. We've really been trying to promote the use of student openers at USC events. But even in that case, student artists are often asked to perform either for free or for a minimal sum. And that's not right. Our student artists deserve to be compensated for the work that they do. It's our goal moving forward to give more opportunities than ever before, and it is also our goal to properly compensate them. That's why out of our $100,000 general programming budget, we have reserved $10,000 of it solely for the purposes of compensating student artists. This will help serve to really ingrain into the USC our need to be properly compensating these hardworking student artists that make our events so much better. Another part of our student life picture is the Wave. It really is a stunning venue. It's both an awesome casual sit-down restaurant, and it's also a place that a lot of the USC, our constituency councils, our club, and others use for events. But with all that we do, it still, I don't think, has reached its full potential. It's really our vision to have the Wave built out with nightly events, fun things for students to go to, in the same way the Spoke right now is. Historically, if we wanted to hold an event in the Wave like the Bachelor Night, it has to come out of the student programs officer's budget. But that also leads to smaller scale events falling by the wayside. Things like if we did like a WAVE equivalent of bespoke trivia. So this year, we've made the decision to augment an additional $15,000 under the WAVE for programming, which will help the WAVE build out its nighttime entertainment repertoire and take our student life further to the next level. On to orientation. The first and most memorable experience that most Western students have is the orientation program. Our O Week really is the envy of our peer institutions, and it's owed in large part to the hard work of our SOFs, our orientation staff, and others. The success is built on that, and the USC does play a vital role. We fund the orientation week. We also oversee most event logistics. And while this is important to celebrate our successes, it's also important to recognize our shortcomings. Our SOF training is in serious need to prepare, and fixing it will require substantial time and investment. We also don't do enough to integrate athletics into orientation. We had a great start this year with Purple Kickoff, but we need to be doing so much more than that. And we also currently don't properly fund our academic orientation. Additionally, with the strength of the US dollar and general inflation in the entertainment industry, our talent budget has less buying power than it once did. And we don't give enough either to our affiliate partners who run their own independent orientation programs. And that's why we're announcing an unprecedented investment of over $200,000 of new money for our orientation program, with $80,000 of that going to direct program expenses. Next year, the orientation program will have substantially more money than it has ever had before to do its critical work transitioning our students into the Western community. Furthermore, this new money will not come at the expense of increased orientation fees, coming instead from the USC's ancillary revenue streams. This change will make our orientation program better than ever before, with the money necessary to make the necessary changes to this program, all while keeping money in students' pockets. Western is lucky as well to be a school full of rich traditions going back over 100 years. One of the most impressive of those is the Mustang Marching Band, which is one of the best university marching bands in Canada. And actually, the director is here today. Hi, Quinn. They've repeatedly shown its value this year, performing at varsity sports games, university events, and our orientation week. They also promote Western outside of campus, going to things like the Juno Awards and the Toronto Santa Claus Parade. The Mustang Marching Band is growing with over 70 students currently involved, and the group is working towards getting the band recognized as a pass-fail course under the Faculty of Music. The USC is a proud partner of the Mustang Marching Band. One of the big sources of funding, a 54-cent fee per student that we levy to help fund the marching band. But as they've grown in size and scope, the Mustang Marching Band, as we heard earlier this year, has become somewhat financially unsustainable. The growth they've had is good for the campus, but it means the band requires more revenue to continue to operate in its current form. Members of the marching band are already paying large fees, and they put in substantial hours fundraising on top of their volunteer work in the band itself. That's why we are proposing raising the marching band fee to $2 per student, allowing the marching band to have a stable and adequate funding source going forward, while still keeping our fees lower than many peer institutions. This will allow the marching band to do even more to make our campus community one that's vibrant and one that celebrates our traditions. Next one I'm going to talk about is connecting with our students. One of the USC's most crucial functions is communications. Effective communication should inform students about who we are and what we do, generate support for our mission, and help earn trust in our leadership. Over time, our team has heard that our students still do not fully understand the USC. They can't differentiate between the programs, services, and operations we provide and those provided by the university. They don't necessarily feel connected to our brand. They fail to appreciate the value that the USC brings to the student experience and their daily lives at Western. Good communications also is more than a reactive practice. Our organization will be strongest when our communications are ingrained strategically and proactively into everything we do. But we need to increase our capacity to communicate. Despite our best efforts, our team is willing to acknowledge that our organization is still ineffective at communications. Acknowledging this reality, we are creating a communications department with one new full-time position whose role will be to bring sustainability and purpose to our overarching communication strategy. The department will offer direct support to the VP Communications and Public Affairs, work with the promotions department, and aim to bridge the gap between the executive and corporate activities of our organization. This will help us create one voice that is the USC. And don't get us wrong, we continue to believe very strongly in student executive leadership. The VP Communications and Public Affairs will still be the leader of our communication strategy, But this department will help build continuity and help them execute their lofty goals and help us communicate like we've never communicated before, ultimately building trust with our students. I also want to talk about brand journalism. While the USC is responsible for so many of the things that happen on campus, as I previously went over, many students are not aware of the impact that we have on their lives. When a student is in a club, they may not realize the vital role the USC plays on the back end in our club system. Or when a student rides on the LTC, they A, don't realize how much work the USC has done to negotiate down the cost of the transit pass, and they B, may not understand all the work we've done to help optimize our LTC routes for student needs. So that is why we're investing in developing a brand journalism capability at the USC. Brand journalism allows us to tell our story and that is consistent with our brand. There's so many good news stories that would never be shared by anyone else, and we need to operate under the principle that if we're not the ones telling our story, no one will. We are creating 2 new brand journalism coordinators who will work with the AVP Public Affairs. Student leaders will be at the forefront of our stories, and every article will encourage students at large to get involved with the USC and take advantage of everything we have to offer. To be clear, the USC's new brand journalism function is in no way intended to compete with or replace our on-campus media activities. Campus media, such as the Gazette, plays a vital role in providing leadership and development opportunities to students, highlighting events and activities on campus in an independent fashion, and most importantly, holding us accountable. Our brand journalism team is designed to complement our campus media, and it will focus on sharing good news stories and not on covering up bad ones. We look forward to continuing our productive working relationship with our campus media outlets. Last, I want to talk about the state of the USC. Every year, the USC executive delivers an address to the students around the halfway point of our term. I think most of us were there, and I think that we can all agree it was a very successful event. In past years, the state of the USC was often the president just speaking to basically empty atrium. In theory, great accountability. In practice, kind of pointless. What we've done this year is we have made that a more elevated experience by moving it up to the wave, making it a meeting of council, inviting our staff and student leaders, as well as inviting university administrators and local politicians, giving out food and drinks so we can socialize and hear students' concerns and collect student feedback. That's why we've raised the budget for the event to $3,500 so that we can continue to make the event accessible to all and present a professional and respectable state of the USC to keep us accountable. I'm now going to talk about amplifying student voices. Amplifying the voice of students is the core of the USC's mission. Student associations are ultimately advocacy-focused bodies, and it is the one thing that we do that no one else could ever do for us. You know, our health plan, the university could in theory run that, but no one but us is able to properly advocate on behalf of our students. It is our core and our greatest strength. That's why this year we have split the vice president into 2 roles, the vice president university affairs and the vice president external affairs, to focus in one case on campus advocacy, and in the other case on municipal, provincial, and federal advocacy. This will allow us to greatly amplify our capacity to advocate on your behalf and bring even more issues to the stakeholders to whom it matters and when it matters. And there's a few things I want to highlight. The first one is, this is going to allow us to have so much more academic advocacy. Ultimately, students are here to learn, and that's why it's so important that we're not only talking to individuals in university administration, but also partnering with our faculty councils to help elevate and amplify their voice when advocating to their own faculty or when they're advocating to university administration. We right now do not do enough on academic advocacy, and we're looking forward to doing so much more next year. And it's not because of the failings of any individual. It's because of the structure that exists. So not only are we splitting the vice president portfolio, we're also adding a new associate vice president academic who will help do research and project management on this file. The other area of campus advocacy we focus on is, of course, student experience-based advocacy. Everything from sexual violence prevention to equity to anything in between that, wellness, and so many other things. They're all vital to our student experience at Western. We've got a lot of wins this year. We've been a key collaborator on the sexual violence policy review, and the quality of the now survivor-centric policy was supported by the strength of our advocacy on it. The new Student Support and Case Management Office, which promises to fill gaps in helping the most vulnerable, was also a direct ask of the USC. We've continued to fight for better quality mental health supports, and we're currently working with Western administration to address sustainability and climate change at the local level. We do, though, want to continue to take it a step further. In addition to the VP split, I'm also announcing that we are adding a new Associate Vice President Student Experience, who will help do research and project management on the student experience file in conjunction with the Vice President University Affairs. Over the last few years, our campus has taken some steps to try and break the Western bubble and get our students more involved in the vibrant London community. But it's also important for students to understand the substantial effect the City of London has on the lives of our students. From snow clearing to housing to transit, the decisions made by local politicians and bureaucrats impact our lives in direct and tangible ways. The USC has prioritized municipal advocacy to ensure that student voices are heard at City Hall. During the recent municipal budget deliberations, the USC was present every single day watching the budget deliberations and ensuring that student needs were prioritized in those budget deliberations. And we were one of the only stakeholder representation groups that was there. We've also advocated for better off-campus housing regulation and tenant rights, as well as for better transit that is geared towards students, such as BRT and the newly announced electrified buses. We've also worked on the Brochdale Task Force, building critical civic relationships that we use to this day. With the new VP External Affairs position, we'll be able to take our municipal advocacy a step further, ensuring student rights are respected and student issues are prioritized even more at City Hall. I also want to talk about our provincial and federal areas. While we work hard to bring student issues forward on campus and in the city, we also have a role to play in advocating to higher levels of the government, the province, and the federal government. By forming alliances with other student associations, we can come to the decision makers at the provincial and federal level, representing collectively hundreds of thousands of students, adding weight to our voice and adding weight to our advocacy. At the provincial level, the USC is a leader in the Ontario Undergraduate Students Alliance, and our Vice President, Kat Dunn, who unfortunately is not here tonight, but sends her regards, currently serves as their president. USA has deep ties in the provincial government, and our advocacy this year has been very successful. Major wins have included securing government investments in mental health and in women's safety. We also have our federal advocacy organization, the Undergraduates of Canadian Research-Intensive Universities, or UCRU, which just finished a federal lobby week meeting with over 70 members of parliament. UCRU is relatively new. We've already secured some key advocacy wins, including increasing Canada student grants, as well as the interest-free deferral period from 6 months to 2 years. The new VP External Affairs will be able to even more elevate the focus we have on building these crucial advocacy alliances across the province and across the country. Now, much of our advocacy that we do happens in one-on-one meetings, behind closed doors, so it's kind of understandable that a lot of students feel like they're disconnected from our advocacy process. While we may never be able to change the way that works, there are things we can do to include everyday students in the advocacy that we do, to the university and to different levels of government. Campaigns such as Textbook Broke, the USA letter writing campaign, or Here to Lead all serve to connect our students with the advocacy priorities we're pursuing, spreading awareness and helping individual students to amplify their voices. I'd also point out, now I didn't even know about this when I wrote the speech, but who here was able to see the awesome advocacy day in the atrium today? That was such an incredible event. The students, including those who won the AirPods and the giant TV, are all, I think, very happy with how that event went. But anyhow, moving into next year, we plan to substantially increase the number and quality of our campaigns, doing even more to drive student awareness and involvement in conversations about things like off-campus housing, gender-based violence prevention, and the cost of education. That's why we've not only increased our campaigns budget, but additionally created 3 new coordinator positions to help the VP University Affairs and VP External Affairs project manage the campaigns they execute. These changes will serve to connect and amplify our student voices like never before. Now, it's no secret Western is a large, complex, and decentralized institution, and it can be hard for students to navigate Western services across different departments. This often results in students failing to access the accommodations or services they need. Other times, students go to online message boards to ask for guidance, and as the executive most active on Reddit, I can confirm that they sometimes receive things of questionable accuracy. Recently, students have also complained about professors either ignoring or finding loopholes in Senate rules designed to help students. So we identified really early on in our process that a major priority of our team was establishing a support service that can help educate students about their rights and work with the ombudsperson to help students navigate the university bureaucracy. Reporting to the VP University Affairs, the new Student Appeals Support Coordinator will enable the USC to play a role in that process, helping students navigate their way through what are often some of the hardest parts of a student's time at Western. Last thing I want to talk about is our international students. Our peer programs exist to help advocate for and support marginalized communities in our campus. Programs like Pride Western, the Gender Equality Network, the Ethnocultural Support Services, and so many others all do incredible work. But the USC has not historically done enough to speak up on behalf of our international students. As a large and growing part of the Western community, international students have unique needs that don't apply to domestic students. And while Western provides support, there's a gap when it comes to student representation. That's why earlier this year, we created the new International Student Support Coordinator portfolio under Cecilia's portfolio. They've so far been doing an incredible job, and we're excited to make them a permanent part of our budget. Next thing I want to talk about is building a culture of wellness. Our students rely on the USC health and dental plans to provide them with low cost and high quality coverage for prescription drugs, health practitioners, dental care, and other health needs. Ensuring our students is critical to support the general wellness of our student body. And it really goes down to the broader pillar, promoting a culture of wellness, and making sure that students have access to the healthcare they need is a key piece in supporting that culture. Our health and dental benefits are currently administered through the Campus Trust, comprised of 12 student associations. Now, while the USC is a founding member of this trust, we have now reached a point where we no longer believe it is in our best interest to continue to be a member of this organization. That's why we decided to leave the trust and chart a course forward independently, giving us more control over our student health plan. And with this new direction, we've also given our health plan a new name, Purple Care. This name embodies the basic principles of our health benefits plan. When a student gets sick, they know that their fellow students have their back. We've also seen fluctuation in usage of our health plan, and we've responded appropriately. For those of you that follow health policy, you'll know that the government changed OHIP to make the government a last payer. And that means our health plan now has to pay a far greater share of the cost of prescription drugs. Since drugs are the single largest expense in our plan, the cost of covering health care for our beneficiaries has greatly increased. Additionally, overall utilization rates in our health plan have also increased. Now, this is a good thing. It means more students than ever before are accessing the health care that they need. However, it also serves to further increase the cost of delivering our health and dental benefits. None of this is free money. Students do ultimately pay for the full cost of the health and dental plan, and as we see the cost and utilization go up, that naturally means that the cost that goes back to the USC has increased substantially. That's why we've made the decision to increase our health and dental premiums by 7% each, ensuring there is enough cash being injected into our healthcare trust to cover the cost of benefits. While this will increase costs for students, it will also ensure we're able to continue to promote wellness and that our need to make cuts to our coverage is mitigated. Another part of wellness is financial well-being. One of the most crucial skills in the modern world is financial literacy. In an era of rising consumer debt, predatory consumer finance practices, and cuts to student aid, it's more important than ever before that students are prepared to manage their finances. But for an organization dedicated to student support and student development, the USC has not historically done enough to teach and promote financial literacy among our students. This year, we've begun partnering with the university, offering financial literacy sessions, and they have seen absolutely incredible turnout, and we're so happy with them. So this year, we've decided to substantially grow our financial literacy activities. Financial literacy and financial programs are now a formal responsibility of the AVP Finance, and we're also doubling the size of our income tax clinic. We've also added a new line to help the AVP Finance put on a financial literacy program throughout the year of $2,000, and this will help our students work towards their financial well-being. Last piece of wellness I want to talk about is food insecurity and how to prevent that. The USC's role is Food Support Services, which is our peer support program dedicated to fighting food insecurity on our campus. It does this both through education and also through running a brick and mortar food bank on the second floor of the UCC, serving hundreds of walk-ins throughout the year. Unfortunately, food insecurity, though, has revealed itself to be a far greater problem on this campus than we can solve easily. Especially with the increased financial pressures on our students, it has become more important than ever before to make serious investments into combating food insecurity on our campus. That's why next year we are more than tripling the budget for operations of food support services, ensuring the service has the money it needs to help our most vulnerable on this campus. And believe me, this is an area that I think there'll be further growth in coming years. The last topic I want to talk about, after I have a quick drink of water, is preparing for the future. Now at the USC, space is central to our mission as an organization providing advocacy and services. We need space for everything we do, from our restaurants to event and meeting spaces to our offices. And while we currently lease over 90,000 square feet from Western, we're somewhat bursting at the seams, quite frankly. And there's really two problems. One is we don't have enough space, and that we need to work with Western to secure more, which is something we've been working on. And the other one is that we currently didn't have someone to really manage our space and be really conscientious of exactly how we're using it, how we're booking it, really overseeing that critical part of our organization. That's why we're creating a new building services department, and we've promoted recently a new building manager. This department will serve to ensure that we are managing our space as effectively as possible and will help us work towards securing additional space from the university. Another less well-known part of our budget process is we also develop a capital budget covering capital improvements such as to our building or to our information technology hardware. Over the last year, we underspent on capital to preserve funds during the uncertainty of SCI. But we're now in a position to return to making strategic investments in priority areas. While much of the capital budget is fixed, such as software costs and the costs of our mortgage, we've chosen to prioritize our discretionary capital funds in two areas. First, we're making investments into improving the equipment and fixtures in the Wave and Spoke, which will help actually improve profitability in the long run by optimizing operations. Second of all, we're really going to focus on making improvements to our building, such as renovating our conference rooms upstairs and renovating our club space, finally. These investments will ensure that we continue to occupy high-quality facilities into the future. Now, another thing that is less well known about the USC is that we do maintain a reserve fund. And that's really for three big reasons. First, it covers unforeseen expenses in emergency situations. Second, sometimes we use it to help finance large capital projects, such as the Spoke renovation a couple of years ago was financed largely out of our reserve fund rather than through debt. And third, we actually hold the funds and invest them, and the returns of that investment serve as an ancillary revenue stream. Our reserve fund currently sits at about $3.5 million. However, the money in our reserve fund is not enough for our current and future needs, and our board has set a target balance of $5 million. As per the reserve fund policy, we have budgeted $120,000 to contribute to our reserve fund this year, allowing us to progressively move closer to our target. It is our long-term goal to grow the reserve fund and then begin using its returns to help further lower the cost of future students' fees, almost like an endowment. Once our reserve fund hits $5 million, for example, at our current rate of return and accounting for inflation, we would be able to use our investment returns to subsidize our student fees by $250,000 a year. As such, we've made it a long-term goal of ours to start putting money away so that our student body can reap future returns. Now, at the time this budget presentation is coming forward, we remain in a period of considerable political uncertainty. Now, as we all know, the Student Choice Initiative has been struck down in the courts. On the other hand, the government is appealing the court's decision, and it remains uncertain, not only if the Student Choice Initiative will come back, but also when. For the time being, however, the directive is not in place, and as such, it is within our authority to levy mandatory fees. One thing that we learned this year is that counterintuitively, optional fees actually cost students more money. While compulsory ancillary fees are tax exempt, optional fees are actually subject to HST, and in this past years, our students have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax that could have been avoided if the fees were mandatory. Additionally, it's our belief that as a democratic body representing students at Western, it is within our authority to levy compulsory ancillary fees. And it's also important to note that services such as advocacy reap benefits to everyone, even those who might opt out of an optional fee that covers the cost of that advocacy. So we've decided to return to an all-mandatory fee bill, with the exception, of course, of the health plan, dental plan, and orientation fee, which remain optional, as they did prior to the Student Choice Initiative. However, we also do need to prepare for risk. And given this risk, we've budgeted for an SCI contingency to cover the cost of potential opt-outs, covered by student fees, and covered not by student fees, but rather covered by our ancillary business revenues. In the event the contingency is not used, we will use this money to contribute more to our reserve fund to help us get closer to our long-term goal. While this option may result in slightly more expensive fees this year, the political uncertainty that currently exists makes this decision sound for both the organization's future health and for our sustainability. Now, one thing we know is that while we deliver extensive services to our constituents, we do also ask our students to pay hundreds of dollars in fees, which can make education less affordable. And that's why in our budgeting process this year, one of our number one goals was keeping more money in your pocket. And although we believe we can justify every dollar of fees that we levy, it's nevertheless a priority that we lower fees as much as we can and be as efficient as an organization as we can possibly hope to be. Now, one of the ways that we do this is through our operations, like the Spoke, Wave, Purple Store, our tenants in the basement, and other ancillary revenue streams. Now, students appreciate those. They appreciate the Spoke, for instance, for it being an awesome, awesome part of campus. They love the bagels there. They love the Rick McGee nights. However, one thing that a lot of students don't know is that the Spoke also makes over $400,000 a year that helps subsidize the cost of your student fees. When you add all of our operations together, even once you account for all of the allocated overhead, like part of the cost of our finance department and part of the cost of our IT department, even then, our ancillary revenue units, such as our operations, bring in over $1 million in profit. This money is used to subsidize your student fees. Now, in this budget, we've chosen to highlight and celebrate our operations and how much they do to lower your student fees and keep more money in your pocket. We've used our profitable business units to establish what we call the operating subsidy, which allows us to make targeted investments in priority areas without having to raise student fees. This year, we focused on academic support, health and wellness, student life, clubs, peer programs, and orientation. Together, these serve to lower the cost of fees on our students by up to $50 each and allows us to give more money to critical areas. So, the last thing I want to note on this keeping more money in your pocket thing, our student fees, despite all of the new money that we're announcing, despite all of the new investments that we're making into the future of the USC and the future of the students at Western, I'm so happy to say that our total fee bill is only going up by 3%. Even better, when you discount the cost of the health and dental plan, which, as I've already explained, are on a rampage of inflation right now due to certain political decisions by the Ontario government, when you discount those, our fees are inflating by only 1.5%, which is less than inflation. In other words, we are adding this much new service while only asking for this much more in student fees. And that is the thing that I am most proud of today. So I've gone over so many of the changes that we've made. Thank you for listening. And I'm happy to take any questions anyone wants to bring forward.
Just before.
However long council wants.
Okay. At this point in time, I'd be looking for a motion to extend the presentation to allow for a question period. Yeah, Councillor Campbell? Or yes, Councillor Reeser, somebody with closer to a mic. Okay, yeah, just make sure you're speaking into the mic.
Motion to extend the presentation by 10 minutes.
All right, can I get a seconder for that? All right, Councillor Lee, are there any objections to extending for 10 minutes? All right, seeing none, we'll continue with the 10-minute question period.
Do you feel like?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. Oh, is that a question? Okay. Yeah, Councillor Carlson.
David Carlson, King's Councillor. I want to thank you for preparing the budget document, but I'd like if you could explain the rationale behind spreading the additional money towards the orientation program through the additional ancillary funding models. It seems somewhat counterintuitive from my perspective to be asking students in years 2 and above to be paying for something that they won't be receiving any benefit from. So could you elaborate on that?
So, yeah, I'm happy to, and thanks for bringing that up. So that's not exactly what's happening. So the money that we're investing in the orientation program, now it really comes in 2 components. First of all, those who, if you go back in history a little bit, 2 years ago the orientation fee was $100 a student. Last year it became $118.26 plus tax. And that $18.26 is the cost of all the USC's overhead. Because of Student Choice Initiative, rather than burying the cost of, for example, part of Cecilia's time, under our base fee, we actually have to bill that out to the service fee. So we actually have a fee reflecting the cost of the specific service that gets delivered. Now, what I'd also note is that that $18.26 is actually somewhat misleading. What I mean specifically by that is, to be honest, we were quite rushed last year, and I think we underallocated the amount that actually costs. We never historically tracked the time that our finance department put in, for instance. And now this year we did, because we wanted to actually get data so we could know how we can be as accurate and as transparent as possible, but what exactly all of our services cost. And when you do all of that, before accounting for the increase of direct program funds, the orientation fee comes out to somewhere in the realm of $145. Now that is obviously, and then tax on top of that, which is another maybe $20 or so. So that is a lot to be asking students to pay for orientation. Now, so where's the money coming from? It's not coming from student fees. This money is ancillary revenue. This comes from the profitability of the Spoke, the Wave, our tenants, our miscellaneous revenue, etc. The Purple Store, which does make money, contrary to certain myths that go around. And I would kind of turn that around and say, like, yes, we're now putting new money into orientation. On the other hand, orientation has historically been the only program that we didn't subsidize with our operating funds. We subsidized clubs, indirectly through reducing the base fee. And what we're doing is we're doing the same thing with orientation. So this $200,000 that we're investing in it, some of that goes towards lowering the fee back down towards about where it was this year, because we know that we're asking students to pay a lot. And it can be a deterrent to first years participating. We want to keep it accessible. And then the remainder is going to increasing program funding. Because again, when you look at things like our talent budget, our buying power has been decreasing. And there's so many new priority areas. And we think that by adding money in this, it is a priority area of ours. And I think that it makes sense that, like all other priority areas of ours, whether it benefits all students or some students, that we're investing some of our operating funds into. But yeah, this is not coming at the cost of, this isn't like, it's not like second years are paying for this. It's like, this is money that comes not from students that we're putting, or it comes from students that they buy a Spoke bagel, for instance. But like, it doesn't come from student fees. Like, that's a transaction when they do that. It comes from the profitability of our well-run operations, and that then goes into helping us subsidize this program.
All right. Yeah, Councillor Campbell.
Okay, Councillor Campbell, Ann Campbell, social science. Okay, I just have a small question. Can you just explain the rationale from the $5 addition in student buildings?
Yeah, so there's a few areas behind that. So the way that these fees get built out is, so there's about a 30-tab spreadsheet on my desktop computer that basically, those of you who are in Ivy will know what I mean when I say MAC, or Management, Accounting, and Control. It's a course, but anyhow, that's a tangent. The point is, this is basically like taken straight out of a cost accounting model, where basically we use an advanced multi-layered formula to basically try and distill exactly the cost that every single service is. So what we'll do, for example, is we'll say, so first we'll take all of our different budgets and we'll build them into kind of like intermediary budgets. Like we'll make Like, this is our corporate admin. This is how much corporate admin costs. This is how much finance costs. This is how much Bardia costs. And then what we'll say is, well, how much of our corporate admin goes towards our student building? What percent of Bardia goes towards the building? So what we'll do is we allocate these cost centers out into the individual service areas, and that's how we build the fees. These fees aren't like, I wouldn't necessarily call it a policy decision. I would say that the amount that we're spending in the first place is a policy decision, but this is just us being like accurate. Now, why has it changed? The reason it's changed is because when we did this last year, we did not see it coming, obviously. It was quite a shock to all of us when student choice came. And it, unfortunately, that meant that we often had to kind of shoot from the hip on some of these measurements. Now this year, we're able to do a lot more concerted data collection on like how much everyone's time is actually spent, or how much of our finance department's time is spent, et cetera. So through that, we did reallocate a bit and say, oh, we actually spent a little more of that time than we thought on that, or a little less of that on that. So that's why we see some of those changes, is it's not us necessarily spending more on student buildings. I will also point out, though, our lease does go up by about 3% every year, so I think that actually does account for that, although a lease is only about half of the cost of that total program.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Kamenetsky.
Oh.
She had her placard.
Right.
Sorry. Nicole Kamenetsky, Social Sci President. I really love the idea of the new reserve fund set aside to compensate student artists. I think that's really important and awesome that it's included. I'm wondering what the model is for actually compensating students individually, if there's like a baseline for a performance for a set amount of time, just to make sure students aren't getting paid like $5 for a performance.
I'll let Cecilia speak to that if you're willing.
Hi. Currently, there is no baseline, but I will say that we do compensate our students fairly. It would never be $5. And I wanted to say that artist isn't just defined by musical artist either. So I think there are a lot of different factors into compensating artists fairly, and we would use a model similar to what we would use when we just get a regular artist to come to Western as well. Depending on the caliber of the artist, the kind of art they do, etc., we would be able to determine then how to work with them and what kind of compensation to give them, also with negotiation from their side as well.
All right, thank you. Councillor Carlson?
David Carlson, King's Councillor. The orientation money that you were talking about, the increase, I was wondering if you could outline more specifically where, what that money is going towards. I don't see it specifically outlined anywhere, and I want to ensure that it's as clear as possible on that front.
Yeah, happy to. So the orientation budget is, the short answer is, well, it's up to you indirectly, in a sense that the orientation budget is passed at a later council meeting. I would anticipate probably AGM, realistically, is when we're going to see that. So it may actually not be you guys passing it. But anyhow, the point is the orientation budget does get approved separately. So what this is for is this is just the kind of the general pool of funds that we have. And then from there, we start allocating that. Now, in terms of what exactly it's for, we have begun our orientation budgeting process. We've started, I think, actually in December, really starting our consultations, and we've been doing them since then. So we're in the early stages of that right now, and starting to talk about what that's going to look like, talk with different stakeholders, with orientation staff members about what they want to see, what their vision is. The way we got to that number, broadly speaking, is it was basically the amount, part of it was the amount that we had to put there, but broadly we recognized that when we started talking during all these consultations, we talk about, for example, we need to spend more money on athletic orientation. Like we spent roughly $3,000 on it this year, which is not enough for something so critical like athletics, which needs to be a bigger part of our orientation program. Now, if we want to spend more money on athletics orientation, the problem is there isn't really anywhere to take the money from. The only options are you could basically cut staff, which would not be a good idea. the orientation staff all each have a lot of work on their plate. You could cut the programming budget basically probably in half, which would mean we wouldn't have nearly the level of talent we currently have. Or you could take money from constituencies, which we also don't want to do. So we've identified basically that we have a long list of things that we want to see, and at the current funding model, there isn't the funds there necessary. Now, I do think that with this additional money, we're going to be around where we need to be as a funding model, and maybe actually this will end up being a more short-term thing. A lot of things like training, that could end up being more of an investment and less of a direct expenditure. I don't know exactly. We're still working on exactly the details, but we do know that we need more money for orientation to succeed, and this is what we brought forward.
All right, thank you. At this point in time, we have other people looking for questions. So can I get a motion to extend for a period of time? Yeah, Councillor Kamenetsky and a seconder. Yeah, Councillor Lee. All right. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kamenetsky. How long did you want to extend for?
Motion to extend for 10 minutes.
Okay. Is that fine, Councillor Lee? Okay. Awesome. All right. So we have another 10 minutes. Councillor McDonald, you are next.
Hi. Oh no. It is on, right? Okay, cool. So, under orientation, it says there's an orientation commissioner, and it was, they've been budgeted for this past year, but not for this coming year. What does that mean?
Yeah, happy to answer that. So, unlike, for instance, the orientation coordinator, whose compensation comes out of the orientation budget, the associate vice president orientation, their compensation comes out of the student programs officer budget because they really work directly to represent the USC's interests specifically. So now there was an idea last year to change the name from associate orientation to orientation commissioner. And the reason there was two lines is one was for the outgoing because they transition in, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's October is transition? Yeah, October, November is when they kind of turn over. So in a fiscal year, which our fiscal year runs from June 1st to May 31st, you'll actually have two separate people occupying the associate orientation role. So the associate orientation line was for the outgoing, and the orientation commissioner was supposed to be for the incoming. Now, we've kind of backtracked on that and decided to, especially now that we're vice president, make it associate vice president again. So it's literally just a retitling. That's the way it came to be. And there's separate lines for incoming and outgoing, so we can track the individuals rather than tracking just the role as a whole.
All right, thank you. Councillor Cronin?
Hi, Matt Grenier, proxy for Councillor Cronin. Purple Care. So in exiting Campus Trust, I'm assuming that we likely would have left with some kind of excess or of our contributions to that trust and fund. Is that of a healthy state? And at what point do we kind of look at those reserves as hitting there as needed? And then would that be counted as an ancillary revenue for us? Or would we just look at reducing premiums or?
Yeah, so to answer your question, there's a few aspects to this. So first of all, we have not pulled out yet. We are still in the Campus Trust. You will still receive your health benefits from there. But we've announced our intention. I've announced at our annual general meeting 2 weeks ago, I announced our intention that we were intending to leave. And right now what we're doing is we're looking at exactly what that looks like. And what that could look like, doesn't necessarily mean it will look like this, is it could mean either that, in one case we go to an insurer, in another case we could make our own trust, but it's just us. Which, by the way, would actually make us the larger of the two campus trusts, because we are over 50% of the campus trust membership. Now, in terms of where the money comes from, yeah, that money went into the trust specifically to cover student benefits. And that money is not going anywhere. It's gonna, if we go from this trust to a new trust, we'll take the money out of there and put it right back into this new trust to cover that. So yeah, that's where the money's going.
All right.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, Councillor Cronin, do you want to do a follow-up?
Yeah.
Okay.
So with the money that we do have in the trust, and even if we do leave and switch to a self-sufficient model or anything like that, is there, are any of the interest or anything like that we accrue on anything collected as ancillary revenue, or is it all contained within that trust to build up the essentially like extreme value or anything.
Yeah, so any money that goes into the trust stays in the trust. And it never gets paid out to the USC. It only gets paid out to individual students to cover their health benefits. For example, I'll give an example right now. The campus trust, we currently have a little over $1.5 million in there right now in our reserve in there, which is separate totally from our stuff that we have on our own reserve fund. And it's got its own investment manager. And note, a trust is a separate legal entity. So the campus trust is its own legal entity, and think of us as basically this corporation is one of the shareholders in that corporation, but it's a separate corporation, so the money it earns doesn't go to us, it goes back to them. In theory, they could transfer the money back to us, but we're not going to do that because we understand that, I don't know, something like it's a healthcare trust and that's where the money's for.
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions? Yep, Councillor Katahata.
Hello, is this working? Hi. Councillor Kaduhata, Arts and Humanities President. I'm just wondering if you could clarify two things. Exactly to what end is the money for the President's Roundtable being used? And then also, what is the change happening with the Student Writer in Residence budget?
Yeah, happy to answer both of those. So the President's Roundtable goes to any expenses incurred in that. It could be getting food at a meeting or coffee. I've actually never been to a President's Roundtable, so you can probably speak more authoritatively on this than I can. But if there's any expenses incurred from that meeting, thinking back, I don't think any money of that has been spent yet, but it's a budget for those meetings. The Student Writer in Residence changes, it's just reflected on the sheet. It's no actual changes directly to the way we do things. The difference is that of that 1,000, half goes to honorarium, which is we pay half and Arts and Humanities pays half, like the faculty, not your council. And the other half goes to the programming budget. So we just split it into two lines so we can track their honorarium and their programming budget separately rather than rolling them together. That's the only change. No real change, really.
Can I ask a follow-up question really quickly?
Sure.
So just wondering, because for the President's Roundtable money, because that hasn't been used yet this year, is it sort of just in case they want to use it next year that's there? And then for the Student Writer in Residence, so you're saying that in previous years there has been the cap of like $500 for programming, and now that's just being highlighted in the budget? Because I was told by a previous Student Writer in Residence that it was kind of just like, talk to the SPO if you want to do additional programming, and then they'll help figure that out with the finances. I didn't know that there was like a limit onto it already.
Yeah. So again, I can't tell you exactly what the President's Roundtable thing is going to be. I don't know. Maybe Bardia is planning on getting you all dinner at the last one. I have no idea. That's not a commitment. That is not a commitment, to be clear. It is a suggestion. So anyhow, as for the Student Writer in Residence, yeah, that may have been the reality in previous years, and the reason that would be the case is because they wouldn't have been taking money out of their budget. It might have come out of, for example, SPO initiatives or SPO general programming. There's lots of, as per the nature of the role, Cecilia has lots of large funds that can be used for a number of different purposes, including $4,000 for initiatives, and in this year, for instance, $85,000 for programming. So it could have been coming out of either of those. I'd have to look into that exact one, but the $500 is a guaranteed base budget. Everything else, it's up to the discretion of the Vice President Student Support and Programming to determine exactly how much, if any, they want to add to that.
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions? Yeah, Councillor Lee? Sorry, can you just speak into the mic so it's on the recording?
Hi, Councillor Lee, Science Councillor. I noticed that in the VP External budget, there's more money allocated to municipal campaigns and less devoted to municipal advocacy. And I wanted to know, like, what's the distinction between like a campaign versus like advocating for something? Yeah.
So the line can be gray sometimes, but I'll give some examples of municipal advocacy. Would be like a very small example is if I needed to take an Uber down to City Hall to go meet with the mayor. Now that's a funny joke because I don't get to meet with the mayor, but anyhow, that's like municipal advocacy, or if I was going to lunch with a politician, or if I was holding a reception for civic politicians, or if I wanted research done, I could pay any number of things. It comes in various forms, and Kat could probably speak far more eloquently about this than I could. Now, in terms of campaigns, that's more for like, campaigns are more things like what we saw in the atrium today. So it's not, it's kind of a gray line that distinguishes between the two. But the idea is kind of showing like this is more designed for campaign related stuff, and this is more like, again, the cost of all the various advocacy things you could do, whatever they may be. Or that could, yeah, it can be any number of things that the advocacy one goes to, but campaigns is a very specific area.
All right, Councillor Katahata.
Hello. Here we go. Third time's the charm. Arts and Humanities Counselor. I just wanted to clarify one more time. I'm really sorry. So I'm just looking at the budget, and the programming budget for student minor in residence is notably lower than all the other programming ones. And I know because in previous years you were saying that it might have been just to the discretion of the SPO, so it wasn't formally outlined like this. So because this appears to be the first time that the programming budget is formally outlined, and how the amount of $500 for their program was set because of its difference compared to the other programming budgets?
So that was set based on basically status quo. Maybe Cecilia has more to say on that, but I think it was largely done based on a status quo number based on what was there last year as well.
All right. Are there any? Oh, sorry.
Kind of passing the baton.
Okay.
Yeah, it is status quo, and it's also needs-based as well. So, I mean, throughout the year, I've checked with the student writer in residence, seeing what what they needed in terms of their budget, and 500 is about the correct amount.
And just to be very clear, I think one important note, because I think that some people might look, for example, and say, okay, well, you have 3,500 for Gender Equality Network and only 3,000 for Indigenous Relations. Does that mean you care more about gender equality than Indigenous relations? The answer to that is obviously no. The reason why we have these different numbers is that these different programs have different, methods of operation, and this is based not on a value judgment. It's based on, we look at our ledgers going back 5-10 years and say, well, what has this program historically spent? What does it seem to need? We talk with Cecilia. We also may consult in certain cases where we're unsure, the coordinator or associate involved. And that's how we set that number. It's not a value judgment. So that's how we arrive at all these numbers. It's based on historically what this program has cost to deliver. And honestly, if there's a new coordinator that comes in and says, I have a big vision for this outside what this budget allows, I can't see a reason why we wouldn't say yes if it was prudent. I mean, remember, budgets are not binding documents. It's not like if the AVP programming works all of their hours, they stop getting paid for the work they do. Budgets are projections. That's why we then take this back to council, Governance and Finance Standing Committee, and go over our actuals, because we have to be like close the loop, because this is just a projection. So that's just how it works.
If there's any further questions, I'll be looking for a motion to extend the question period again. Yeah, Councillor Lee.
Motion to extend the question period by 10 minutes.
Okay, can I get a seconder? Okay, Councillor Adewusi. All right, you have 10 more minutes. And sorry, did you have a question as well, Councillor Lee? No? Okay, are there any other questions? Yeah, Councillor White.
Haley White, King's president. Can you please explain what is included under elections readiness in the Vice President External Affairs?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As you know, this year we ran a big thing in collaboration, among other things, with KUCSC, a pretty big Get Out the Vote campaign for elections, helping educate our students and all of that. The problem is about elections is it's very, very hard to budget for them, especially because unlike in, for example, the States, we have a Westminster Parliament, and Trudeau's government could fall at any minute and we could have another election. So it's very hard to tell exactly how much that's going to cost. So what we did is we said, all right, so we need to look at what this cost and figure out a way to budget for that. And because it's not, historically we've tried to guess at when elections are going to happen, but I don't know if that's the best model. So what we've instead done is we basically said the average election that we do costs about, how much we put for it? It was $4,000. That's about how much an average election costs for us to do our programming on. Then we said, well, how often are there elections? So we have 3 levels of government, each of which elects every 4 years, but sometimes you have minority governments will dissolve halfway through their term. So you can basically assume an average of 1 election costing $4,000 every year. Now, are the actuals going to be that? Probably not. There could very well not be an election next year. And we could have 0 spent of $4,000. But the prudent budget, because the budget's just a projection, so your best possible guess on what next year will probably cost is $4,000. If there's 2 elections, we'll spend $8,000, and we'll tell council why we're spending $8,000, and I hope you'll forgive us, because there's 2 elections. So that's kind of how we do that projection. So it's really based on trying to look over the long run rather than looking at the realities of next year specifically.
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions? All right, so seeing no other questions.
Thank you.
All right, yes, sorry, thank you, Declan. Secretary Treasurer Hodgins. Just gonna make sure our timer doesn't go off here. Okay, so now that we're done our presentations, we can move on to our for action section. First up is our motion on the executive budget. It should be fine. You guys can all see the agenda. It just says, be it resolved that council approve the 2020-2021 executive budget. President Gillier, would you like to speak to the motion? You're down as the mover. Okay, nope. Okay. Can I get a seconder for the motion? Yeah, Councillor Adewusi, would you like to speak to the motion? No? Okay. All right, are there any questions about the motion? Yeah, Councillor Carlson.
David Carlson, King Councillor. I was wondering if we could have some more insight, and if this more reflects on the fee schedule rather than this, then I can hold the question till later, but I'll say it now. You've outlined that there's a $50 per student operating subsidy approximately, but you also identified in my question about the orientation program increase that this number potentially could have been larger, but part of it's being allocated to offset the cost of the orientation program under first-year students, if I understood your response correctly. So I'm wondering, can we be assured that this is like the maximum savings that the USC is able to provide for students?
Just if your question's about the fee schedule, that's the next motion.
I'm not sure if it actually pertains to the fee schedule or the budget.
Okay. Secretary Treasurer Hodgins, do you want to answer that?
So what I would say is, okay, here's what I can assure you, and I would say this is the most prudent level of savings that we can receive. Now, there's a number of ways that we could have more savings. One of them would be, for instance, budgeting the absolute bare bones minimum on every expense and hope that it doesn't end up going over, and using overly aggressive budgeting on different things. And we can charge whatever we want in student fees. And our job is to try and match our student fees with what, with the amount of money we think we're going to need. So, the orientation savings are a part of that 50. It's up to $50. It depends on who you are. For example, by nature of the fact that we've recently have a new affiliate agreement, affiliate students, for instance, will maybe see a little less than that because a 10% savings on less money is less savings. So it kind of varies student by student. What I can say is that I think that when you look at how our priorities align and how it all works, I think that we are doing a pretty good job of saving students money in a relatively prudent way, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to say that's the most we could receive, because I could absolutely move things around and in theory, add to the amount of savings. But I think that when you look at what is wise and what is prudent, exactly what we want to do, I think I've arrived at the happy middle on that.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions about the first motion? All right, so seeing no other questions. Oh, yeah, sorry. No? Okay. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to debate. Yep, Councillor Campbell. Can you pass her a mic? Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, speaking in favor in particular of the orientation prioritization, I think for context, I should identify that I'm the incoming head staff of social science. So I'm a little bit biased in this regard. But I think that orientation, we have to see it as an opportunity for both Western and the USC to really set a clear tone regarding the priorities of the USC and of students. And so adequate training is something that's essential to protect our softs and who are really at the front lines of all of this, and first years who are at such an impressionable and vulnerable place in their university experience. And so having been in the orientation program, this will be going into my 4th year, I've seen 2 primary gaps, in particular in regards to training, in regards to mental health training for both softs and first years, both in N week and throughout the year, as well as sexual violence training for both softs and first years. And I don't think that this gap is solely existing in orientation. However, I think beginning with a gap in adequate training at this very pivotal moment in students' experience translates to the damaging culture that we currently have on campus regarding sexual assault and mental health. And so given that clearly money is finite, as we've seen with this budget, placing the money in orientation and making that a priority really sends a clear message of where our priorities lie. And I believe that investing in training and the prioritization of extremely important topics and ensuring that our students are safe is something that we should really be advocating for as student leaders, because we can't be asking our softs, who are student leaders, to be investing so much time into our school and student body if we aren't going to make sure that we're protecting them as well.
All right, thank you. Are there any further points of debate? Did anybody want to speak against the motion? All right, so if there's no other points of debate, we'll move on to vote. Please raise your placard if you would like to abstain from voting. All right, please raise your placard if you are against passing the motion. All right, the motion passes not unanimously. All right, we will move on to our second motion, the fee schedule. Oh, there's the first one. All right, President Gelayer, would you like to speak to the motion? No? Okay, can I get a seconder for the motion? All right, Councillor Campbell, did you want to speak to the motion? No? All right. Are there any questions about the fee schedule? Okay, seeing no questions, we'll move on to debate. Are there any points of debate on the fee schedule? Okay, so seeing no points of debate, we will call to question. Please raise your placard if you would like to abstain from voting on the fee schedule. All right, please raise your placard if you would like to vote against the motion. All right, both motions pass, and we don't have any, so we'll move on to our for information section. We'll save those reports for our meeting on the 26th. Are there any items for discussion? No. Any new business? All right. Seeing no new business items, I'll be looking for a motion to terminate the meeting. Yep, Councillor Paharger, and a second, Councillor Barroso. All right. Thank you for coming, everybody, and thank you, Secretary Treasurer Hodgins.
Please return the budget handouts. Don't take them with you. They were very expensive to print.